Why did your flight just jump 40% overnight? Two people can sit in the same row, on the same plane, and pay completely different prices for the exact same seat. It feels random, it feels personal, like the airline saw you looking and decided to charge you more. But that's not what's happening. Airlines aren't raising prices because you checked twice. They're reacting to something else entirely. A system built to manage uncertainty, competition, and risk. And once you see that system, the chaos starts to make sense. Before 1978, airline pricing barely moved. The government controlled fares, routes, and competition. Prices were largely fixed, with very little variation from day to day. Then, deregulation hit, and everything changed. Airlines could suddenly set their own prices. New competitors flooded the market. Overnight, pricing became a problem no one had ever solved at this scale. Because a plane seat is a strange product. Once the plane takes off, any empty seat is gone forever. Zero value. So now airlines had a new challenge. How do you price something perishable with fixed supply, unpredictable demand, and aggressive competition? One airline figured it out first, and it wasn't by being cheaper, it was by being smarter. American Airlines realized something simple, but powerful. Not all passengers behave the same. Some people book months in advance and hunt for deals. Others book a few days before departure and just need to get there. So instead of selling every seat at one price, why not sell the same seat at different prices, depending on when and how people book? That idea became yield management. Today, we call it dynamic pricing. Here's where it gets interesting. Americans started forecasting demand for every flight. If demand looked strong, prices went up. If demand looked weak, prices dropped. And they didn't do this once. They kept updating those forecasts constantly as new bookings came in. Because every empty seat was lost revenue, the system learned something else. It started overbooking flights on purpose based on how many people typically don't show up. This wasn't guesswork anymore. It was a system designed to predict behavior. It worked so well that it reshaped the entire industry and turned American Airlines into the largest airline in the world. But to make that system work, airlines needed a mechanism. They needed a way to sell the same seat at different prices. That's where fare classes come in. When you see one price, the airline sees dozens. Each seat is tied to a category with its own rules, restrictions, and flexibility. These aren't physical sections of the plane. They're virtual layers, built partly from early reservation system limits and later refined for revenue strategy. And here's the key. Multiple price levels can exist at the same time. The system decides which ones are available based on demand. That's why a $100 fare can disappear and a $400 fare is all that's left. Not because the seat changed, because the system decided the cheaper option shouldn't be available anymore. But demand isn't the only force at work. Airlines are constantly watching each other. If one airline drops a fare, competitors see it and respond quickly, even if demand hasn't changed at all. So now you have two forces interacting, forecasting and competition. And sometimes they push in opposite directions. Here's why that matters. On competitive routes, airlines undercut each other, which keeps prices lower. But on routes with little or no competition, the exact same system pushes prices higher, because nothing is forcing them down. That's why flights between major cities are often cheaper than flights to smaller ones. So, what actually causes prices to move day to day? A large part of it comes down to forecasting. Airlines build booking curves for every flight, a prediction of how many seats they expect to sell at each point before departure. Then reality comes in. If bookings are ahead of expectations, prices rise. If bookings are behind, prices fall. But that's only part of it. Seasonality matters. Holidays, events, weather patterns. Even typical no-show rates affect how many seats the system is willing to sell. So prices aren't reacting to you, they're reacting to how reality compares to a forecast. And now the system is evolving again. Airlines are moving beyond traditional fare buckets. Instead of fixed price steps, they can adjust prices more fluidly. Modern systems estimate how likely someone is to buy at a given price and adjust accordingly. And here's the part most people misunderstand. These systems usually don't need to know who you are. They infer your type from context, when you're booking, how close you are to departure, how long you're staying, whether there's a weekend involved, and how competitive the route is. This isn't personalization in the retail sense, it's pattern recognition at scale. And it's used not just in the US, but across Europe and around the world, with different levels of competition and regulation layered on top. Once you understand this system, a few things become clear. First, timing matters. For most domestic leisure travel, prices are often more favorable somewhere around 1 to 3 months out. For international trips, that window usually shifts earlier, often 2 to 6 months out, and even earlier for peak seasons. Second, competition matters. Routes with multiple airlines tend to have more price drops. Third, prices can reverse. If a fare disappears, it doesn't always mean it's gone forever. Sometimes the system adjusts and brings it back. Fourth, searching repeatedly doesn't raise your price, but waiting too long often does, because late bookings tend to signal urgency. And finally, flexibility wins. Shifting your trip by even a day or two can move you into a completely different demand pattern. Airline pricing isn't random. It's a system solving a difficult problem: how to sell a fixed number of seats on a flight that disappears forever to people who value it differently, at different times, in a competitive market. And that system isn't reacting to you. It's reacting to everyone else. And once you see that, the chaos disappears. If you found this breakdown useful, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who always wonders why flight prices change.